The wind on Varus 9 never stopped. It howled through the metal buildings like a hungry animal. It carried dust and sand that scratched the skin and burned the eyes. This was not a kind planet. It was a place where people came to work, suffer, and count the days until they could leave. Yuna had been counting for 3 years now. She was 26 years old, small and thin, with black hair that she kept tied back in a simple knot. Her hands were rough from years of hard work. Her eyes were tired but still held a spark of something the other workers had lost long ago. Hope, maybe. Or perhaps just stubbornness. She was the only human on the mining colony. The Kelvari who ran the place had hired her because humans were cheap. They could survive on less food, less water, and less respect than anyone else in the galaxy. Yuna knew this. She had signed the contract anyway because she needed the money. Her family back on Earth was waiting for her to send credits home. The Kelvari were tall creatures with gray skin and 4 arms. They moved with a grace that made Yuna feel clumsy. They spoke in deep voices and looked at her like she was an insect that had wandered into their home. Most of them ignored her. Some of them laughed at her. A few of them made her life as difficult as possible. Taiwan was the worst. He was a senior officer with cold black eyes and a smile that never reached them. He had given Yuna the most dangerous job on the colony. Every night she had to clean the outer vents near the Deadlands. This was the area where the wild creatures lived. The creatures that killed. The Kelvari called them Ravix. Yuna had seen pictures of them in the safety training. They were massive beasts with black scales that shone like polished stone. They had 6 eyes that glowed amber in the darkness. Their claws could cut through metal like paper. Their teeth could crush bone like dry leaves. The training video said one thing very clearly. If you see a Ravik run, if you cannot run, pray. If prayer does not work, accept death. Yuna thought about this every night as she walked to the outer vents. She carried a small light and a tool bag. She had no weapon. Weapons were not given to maintenance workers. Weapons were for soldiers. Yuna was not a soldier. She was just a small human doing a job that nobody else wanted to do. On the night, everything changed. The wind was worse than usual. Yuna could barely see through the dust. She finished her work quickly and was walking back to the colony. When she heard a sound that made her blood turn cold, it was a cry of pain. Low and deep, like thunder trapped underground, every part of her body told her to run. But something else, something older and stranger, told her to look. Humans had always been curious creatures. It was what made them explore oceans and climb mountains and reach for the stars. It was also what got them killed. Yuna followed the sound. She found the creature in the wreckage of an old ship that had crashed years ago. The Ravik was lying on its side, breathing in short, painful gasps. It was even bigger than the pictures had shown. Its body was the size of a transport shuttle. Its scales were cracked and bleeding. One of its 6 eyes was swollen shut. Yuna should have run. She knew this. The creature could kill her with one swipe of its claws. But as she stood there in the darkness, watching it suffer, she felt something unexpected. She felt sorry for it. The Ravak turned its 5 working eyes toward her. They glowed weakly in the dim light. Yuna waited for it to attack. She waited for the claws and the teeth and the death that was supposed to come. But the creature just looked at her. It made a soft sound, almost like a question. Yuna did something stupid. Something wonderfully, terribly human. She came back the next night with food. It was just protein bars from her own rations. She could not afford to give them away, but she did anyway. She placed them near the creature and stepped back. The Ravik watched her for a long time. Then slowly, it ate. This became their routine. Every night Yuna would finish her work and visit the creature. She brought food, water, and medicine that she stole from the colony supplies. She talked to it softly, even though she knew it could not understand her. She told it about Earth, about her family, about the dreams she used to have before life became about survival. She sang to it sometimes. Old songs that her grandmother had taught her, Songs about mountains and rivers and lovers who waded through long winters. The creature listened. Its eyes followed her every movement. After 2 weeks, it stopped growling when she approached. After 3 weeks, it let her touch its scales. After a month, it would lift its massive head and make a rumbling sound when it saw her coming, almost like it was happy. The other workers noticed. Taewon noticed. He called a meeting and announced that the human maintenance worker was behaving strangely. She was spending time in the Deadlands. She was wasting colony resources. She was, he said with disgust, playing with a monster. The Kelvari laughed. They made jokes about weak humans and their foolish emotions. One of them suggested that they let the beast eat her. It would save them the cost of her return trip to Earth. Yuna heard the laughter. She heard the jokes. She kept her head down and said nothing. That night, she went back to the creature. She sat beside it in the darkness and felt its warm breath on her skin. It was still dangerous. It could still kill her. But somehow, in some strange way, it felt like the safest place on the planet. She decided to give it a name. Gom, she called it. The Korean word for bear. Her grandmother used to tell her stories about bears. In those stories, bears were not just animals. They were protectors, guardians, creatures that could become human if they waited long enough and loved hard enough. Gom made a soft sound when she spoke its name. Its 6 eyes blinked slowly. Something had changed between them. Something that the Kelvari, with all their technology and knowledge, would never understand. Yuna had stopped being afraid, and Gom had stopped being alone. Neither of them knew what was coming. They did not know that Taiwan was already making plans. They did not know that the colony overseer had approved a hunt. They did not know that in the days ahead, they would be forced to run, to fight, and to discover truths that would shake the entire galaxy. For now, they just sat together in the ruins of an old ship while the wind howled outside. A small human and a monster, learning to be family. The weeks passed slowly on Varus 9. The wind kept blowing. The dust kept flying. The Kelvari kept laughing at the strange human who visited the Deadlands every night. But something was happening that none of them expected. Gom was changing. It started with small things. The creature would wait for Yuna at the edge of the wreckage, watching the path she always took. When she arrived, it would make a low, rumbling sound in its chest. Not a growl of warning, but something softer. Something almost like greeting. Then it began to follow her. Yuna first noticed it. When she was walking back to the colony one night, she felt eyes on her back. When she turned around, she saw Gom moving through the shadows like a ghost made of black stone. It stayed far enough away that the colony sensors would not detect it. But it was there, watching, guarding. She should have been afraid. A Ravik was following her. A creature that could kill 20 soldiers without trying. But Yuna did not feel fear. She felt something strange and warm in her chest. She felt protected. The bond between them grew stronger every day. Yuna started teaching Gom simple commands. She would hold up her hand and say the word for stop. She would wave her arm and say the word for come. She did not know if the creature understood her language, but it understood her. Gom learned faster than any animal Yuna had ever seen. Within days, it responded to a dozen different commands. It would sit when she told it to sit. It would stay when she told it to stay. It would come when she called its name, but more than that, began to anticipate what she needed. One night, a heat storm rolled across the Deadlands. These storms were dangerous. They brought temperatures that could cook a human in minutes. Yuna was caught outside when it hit. She tried to find shelter, but the wind was too strong. She fell to her knees, feeling the air burn her lungs. Then Gom was there. The creature wrapped its massive body around her like a living shield. Its scales blocked the heat. Its bulk blocked the wind. Yuna pressed herself against its chest and listened to the slow beat of its heart while the storm raged outside. When it was over, Gom nudged her gently with its snout. Its 6 eyes looked at her with something that could only be called concern. Yuna hugged its neck and cried, She was not alone anymore. For the first time in 3 years on this terrible planet, she had someone who cared if she lived or died. The mockery at the colony got worse. Taiwan spread rumors that Yuna had lost her mind. He said that humans were emotionally unstable creatures who formed attachments to anything, even monsters. He said it was pathetic. He said it was dangerous. Most of the Kelvari agreed with him. They avoided Yuna like she carried a disease. They whispered behind her back and laughed at her face, but not everyone thought she was crazy. Jisoo was another human on the colony. She had arrived 6 months ago, young and scared and desperate for work. Yuna had helped her adjust. She had shared her food when Jisoo was hungry. She had talked her through the loneliness that came from being so far from home. Now, Jisoo came to her with a warning. They were sitting in Una's small room. It was barely big enough for a bed and a table. The walls were thin. The air was stale. But it was the only private space Yuna had. Jisoo spoke in a low voice. Her eyes were full of fear. Taiwan was planning something. He had been talking to the colony overseer, Kelvari woman named Moran. He wanted permission to hunt the Ravik that Yuna had been visiting. He called it a contamination risk. He said it was too close to the colony. He said it needed to be eliminated before it killed someone. Yuna felt cold fear grip her heart. She had to do something. She had to protect Gom. But what could one small human do against an entire colony of Kelvari soldiers? That night, she went to the Deadlands earlier than usual. Gom was waiting for her as always. It made its greeting sound and lowered its head so she could touch it. Yuna held its face in her hands and looked to its 6 amber eyes. She told it that danger was coming. She did not know if it understood her words, but she hoped it understood her feeling. The fear in her voice, the love in her touch. Gom made a sound she had never heard before. It was soft and musical, like a song sung underwater. Then it did something that made her breath catch in her throat. It pressed its forehead against hers in that moment. Yuna felt something pass between them. Not words. Something deeper than words. A connection that went beyond language and species and everything she thought. She knew about the universe. She understood then that Gom was not just learning commands. It was not just following her like a trained pet. It had chosen her. Deliberately. Consciously. It had looked at this small, weak human and decided that she was worth protecting. Worth loving, she was its family now. Far away in the colony, someone else was watching. Dr. Nara was a Kelvari scientist who studied alien creatures. She had been observing Yuna and the Ravok through hidden cameras for weeks. What she saw made no sense according to everything she had been taught. Raviks were supposed to be mindless. They were supposed to be driven only by hunger and rage. They did not form bonds. They did not protect. They did not feel. But the data on her screen told a different story. She had scanned the creature's brain patterns from a distance. What she found shocked her. The Ravik was developing new neural pathways. Pathways that were associated with attachment, recognition, and loyalty. Pathways that should not exist in a creature like this. Something in the human's behavior was changing the beast at a fundamental level. Dr. Nara sat back in her chair and thought about what this meant. Humans were considered primitive by most of the galaxy. They were weak, short-lived, and overly emotional. But maybe those emotions were not a weakness. Maybe they were something else entirely. Maybe humans had a gift that other species did not. Understand, they could make anything love them. Dr. Nara did not share her findings with anyone. Not yet. She wanted to see how far this would go. She wanted to understand what was happening before Taiwan and the others destroyed it, but time was running out. The hunt had already been approved. The soldiers were already preparing their weapons. In 3 days, they would march into the Deadlands and kill the creature that had dared to love a human. And Yuna, sitting in the darkness with her arms around Gom's neck, had no idea that her world was about to fall apart. The soldiers came at dawn. Yuna was sleeping in her small room. When the alarm woke her, red lights flashed on the ceiling. A loud voice announced that all workers should stay inside. A security operation was in progress. Her heart knew what this meant before her mind could accept it. She ran outside without thinking. The corridor was empty. Everyone had obeyed the warning and stayed in their rooms. But Yuna could not stay. She could not hide while they hunted Gom. The morning air was cold and sharp. Yuna ran toward the edge of the colony where the Deadlands began. Her lungs burned. Her legs ached. But she did not stop. She saw them before they saw her. 20 Kelvari soldiers stood in a line near her quarters. They wore black armor and carried plasma rifles that hummed with deadly energy. Tywin stood at the front, his forearms crossed over his chest. His black eyes scanned the Deadlands with cold satisfaction, and there, behind the soldiers, was Gom. The creature had not run. It had come to the colony looking for Yuna. It stood in the open, its 6 eyes moving from soldier to soldier. It was not attacking. It was not even growling. It was just waiting for her. Yuna pushed through the line of soldiers before anyone could stop her. She ran to Gom and placed herself between the creature and the guns. Her arms spread wide. Her body shook with fear and anger and desperate love. Tywin laughed. It was an ugly sound. He told her to step away from the beast. He said it was a danger to the colony. He said it would be killed, whether she liked it or not. He said that humans were fools who could not tell the difference between a pet and a monster. Yuna did not move. Her voice was small but steady. She said that Gom had not hurt anyone. She said that he was peaceful. She said that all he wanted was to be left alone. Tywin stopped laughing. His eyes grew hard. He raised his hand to give the order to fire. What happened next would be told in stories for generations. Gom moved faster than anything that large should be able to move. Before the soldiers could react, the creature wrapped its massive body around Yuna. Its scales shifted and hardened, forming a shell that covered her completely. She was inside a living fortress. The soldiers fired. Plasma bolts screamed through the air. They struck Gom's scales and bounced away like sparks off stone. The creature did not flinch. It did not retreat. It just kept holding Yuna, protecting her from the storm of fire that would have killed her in an instant. The soldiers kept firing. Their weapons grew hot. Their faces grew confused and afraid. Nothing was working. Then Gom roared. The sound was like nothing Yuna had ever heard. It was not just loud. It was something that hit the body and the mind at the same time. The soldiers dropped their weapons and grabbed their ears. Some of them fell to their knees. Others ran. One stood frozen, his black eyes wide with something he had never felt before. Fear. Yuna felt the shell around her open. Gom's head turned toward her. Its 6 eyes were calm and steady. It lowered its body, and she understood what it wanted. She climbed onto its back. The scales were warm under her hands. She found places to grip, spots where the armor was ridged enough to hold. Gom waited until she was secure. Then it ran. The creature crashed through the colony wall like it was made of paper. Metal screamed and bent. Dust exploded into the air. Yuna held on tight as the world became a blur of speed and wind. They ran into the Dadla and Dias. Behind them, the colony fell into chaos. Soldiers shouted orders. Alarms blared. Tywin screamed that they should follow. They should not let the human and the monster escape, but nobody followed. The Deadlands were vast and empty. The ground was rocky and broken. Strange plants grew in twisted shapes. The air smelled of dust and something older, something that Yuna could not name. Gom ran for hours. It never seemed to get tired. Yuna pressed her face against its scales and felt the steady rhythm of its movement. She should have been afraid. She was a fugitive now. She had no food, no water, no plan, but she was free. When the sun began to set, Gom finally stopped. They were deep in a part of the Deadlands that Yuna had never seen. The rocks here were different. They were carved with strange shapes, lines and circles and patterns that looked almost like writing. Gom made a soft sound and looked at something in the distance. Yuna followed its gaze. There was a cave ahead. It was hidden behind a wall of fallen rocks, almost invisible unless you knew where to look. Gome walked toward it slowly, carefully. It made the singing sound again, the one Yuna had heard before. Other sounds answered from the darkness. Yuna's heart stopped. More Ravix emerged from the cave. 5 of them. Then 10. Then more than she could count. They were all different sizes. Some were as big as Gom. Others were smaller, younger. Their eyes glowed in the fading light like a field of amber stars. Yuna should have been terrified. She was surrounded by creatures that could kill her without effort. But Gom was calm. It made sounds to the others, and they responded. It was a conversation. A communication that Yuna could not understand but could feel. Then something amazing happened. The other Ravix came closer. They sniffed at Yuna. They touched her with their snouts. One of the smaller ones made a chirping sound and pressed against her leg like a cat wanting attention. They were not threatening her. They were greeting her. Gom made a sound that was almost like a laugh. It nudged Yuna gently with its head. She understood then. Gom had brought her home. Not to a place, but to a family. These were its people, its pack, its kin. And now, because Gom had chosen her, they were accepting her too. Yuna sank to her knees. Tears streamed down her face. She did not know if they were tears of fear or joy or something in between. A small Ravak climbed into her lap and curled up there. It was warm and heavy and alive. Somewhere behind her, the colony was probably planning revenge. Somewhere behind her, Taiwan was probably swearing to hunt her down. Somewhere behind her, the life she had known was gone forever. But here, in this hidden place, surrounded by creatures that the galaxy called monsters, Yuna felt something she had not felt in years. She felt like she belonged. The cave was deeper than Yuna expected. Gome led her through tunnels that twisted and turned through the rock. The walls glowed with a faint blue light that came from crystals growing in the stone. The air was cool and clean, nothing like the dusty wind outside. Other Ravix walked beside them. The small one that had climbed into her lap earlier stayed close to her legs, making soft chirping sounds. Yuna reached down and touched its head gently. It pressed against her hand. She had never imagined that creatures like this could be so gentle. Everything she'd been told about Ravix was about death and violence and mindless rage. But these animals were calm. They moved with purpose. They looked at each other with something that seemed very much like understanding. The tunnel opened into a vast chamber. Yuna stopped walking. Her breath caught in her throat. The chamber was enormous. It stretched so far that she could not see the walls on the other side. But what made her stop was not the size. It was what filled the space. There were buildings here. Ancient structures made of carved stone rose from the ground. They were broken and crumbling, covered with dust and time. But they were clearly buildings, homes, temples, places where people had once lived and worked and loved. The walls were covered with carvings, beautiful, detailed images of Ravix in poses that Yuna had never imagined. Ravix building things. Ravix creating art. Ravix raising young ones. Ravix gathered together in what could only be ceremonies or celebrations. In the center of the chamber stood a statue. It was a Ravak, but different from the ones Yuna knew. This one stood upright on 2 legs. Its 4 arms were raised toward the ceiling. Its 6 eyes were carved with incredible skill, seeming almost alive. Yuna walked toward it in a daze. She touched the base of the statue. Her fingers traced the carved lines, the shapes that looked so much like writing. This was not the work of mindless beasts. This was the work of artists, thinkers, creators. Gome came to stand beside her. It made a low, sad sound. Yuna looked into its eyes, and suddenly she understood everything. The Ravix were not monsters. They had never been monsters. They were the original people of this planet. They had built cities and created art and lived in peace for thousands of years. They had minds and hearts and souls. They had loved and dreamed and hoped, just like every other thinking creature in the galaxy. And then the Kelvari. Yuna did not need words to understand what had happened. She could see it in the ruins around her. She could see it in the sadness in Gom's eyes. She could feel it in the heavy silence that filled the chamber. The Kelvari had come to this planet looking for minerals. They found something else. They found a species that was different from them. Weaker in some ways. Less advanced in technology, easy to push aside. What followed was not a war. A war suggests that both sides had a chance. This was something worse. This was destruction. This was erasure. This was the systematic murder of an entire civilization. The Kelvari hunted the Ravix like animals. They burned their cities. They destroyed their art. They killed anyone who tried to resist. And when it was over, they spread stories about how the Ravix were mindless beasts, monsters to be feared and eliminated. The survivors fled to the Deadlands. They hid in caves and ruins. Over generations, trauma and fear changed them. They forgot how to speak. They forgot how to build. They forgot what they had once been, but they did not forget how to feel. Somewhere deep inside, they remembered. They remembered trust. They remembered family. They remembered love. And when Yuna showed kindness to Gom, when she treated it not as a monster, but as a living being worthy of care, something ancient woke up. Yuna sat down on the dusty ground. She could not stand anymore. The weight of what she had learned was too heavy. She looked at Gom. Her voice was barely a whisper. She said she was sorry. She said she did not know. She said that what happened to his people was wrong. It was evil. It was a crime that the galaxy had forgotten. Gom lowered its massive head. It pressed its forehead against hers, just as it had done before. Yuna felt that strange connection again. That wordless communication that went deeper than language. Gom was not angry at her. It knew she was different. It knew she was kind. That was why it had chosen her. That was why it had brought her here, to this sacred place that no outsider had ever seen. It wanted her to know the truth. It wanted someone to remember. A sound broke the silence. Yuna turned to see Jisoo stumbling into the chamber. The young woman was covered in dust and breathing hard. She had followed them from the colony, walking for hours through the dangerous Deadlands. Jisoo stopped when she saw the ruins. Her eyes went wide with shock. Yuna went to her. She held her friend and explained what she had learned. She told her about the civilization that had existed here. She told her about what the Kelvari had done. She told her about the truth that had been buried for so long. Jisoo listened with tears streaming down her face when Yuna finished. Bad news. The colony had made a decision. Taiwan had convinced Overseer Miran that the Ravix were too dangerous to let live. They were preparing bombs, big ones, enough to destroy the entire Deadlands and everything in it. Every Ravak, every ruin, every trace of the truth. They were going to finish what their ancestors had started. Yuna felt cold rage fill her chest. It was not the hot anger of a moment. It was something deeper. Something that came from a place she did not know existed inside her. She looked around the chamber at the Ravix who had gathered. Dozens of them. Maybe 100. Old ones and young ones. Survivors of a genocide that the galaxy had chosen to forget. They were looking at her, waiting, trusting she was human. She was small and weak and had no power in this galaxy. But she had something that the Kelvari did not have. She had the truth. And she had a family that was willing to fight for her. She stood up. She looked at Gom. She looked at Jisoo. Her voice was steady when she spoke. She said they were going back, not to fight, not to destroy, but to show the galaxy what had really happened here, to make everyone see the truth that had been hidden for so long. Gom made a sound, a call that echoed through the chamber. The other Ravix answered they were ready, and so was she. The march began at sunset. Why? Una walked at the front. Gom moved beside her, its massive body casting a shadow that stretched across the rocky ground. Behind them came the others. More than 100 Ravix, their amber eyes glowing like torches in the fading light. They did not walk like beasts going to battle. They walked like people returning home, proud, dignified, unafraid, Jesu had gone ahead to warn the colony. She would tell them that Yuna was coming. She would tell them that the Ravix meant no harm. She would beg them to listen before anyone did something that could not be undone. Yuna did not know if anyone would listen. She did not know if this would work, but she knew she had to try. These creatures had trusted her with their history, their pain, their hope. She would not let them down. The colony appeared on the horizon as the last. Light faded from the sky. Yuna could see soldiers on the walls. She could see weapons pointed at the approaching Ravix. She could hear alarms screaming through the night air. The entire colony was in panic. Good, she thought. Let them be afraid. Let them feel what the Ravix had felt for generations. She raised her hand, and the Ravix stopped. All of them at the same moment, like a single creature with 100 bodies. They sat down on the ground and waited. The soldiers did not fire. They were too shocked to move. Yuna walked forward alone. Her heart pounded in her chest. Her legs shook with each step, but she did not stop. She walked until she reached the main gate of the colony. Taiwan was there. His face was twisted with rage and confusion. He demanded to know what she was doing. He said she was insane. He said she had brought death to everyone in the colony. Yuna looked at him with calm eyes. She said that no one would die tonight. She said that the Ravix had not come to attack. They had come to be seen. They had come to show the colony what they really were. Taiwan laughed. It was an ugly, scared sound. He said they were monsters. He said everyone knew they were monsters. He said there was nothing to show. Yuna smiled sadly. She said he was wrong. She said she had seen their cities. She had seen their art. She had seen the proof of a civilization that his ancestors had destroyed. She said the Ravix were not monsters. They were survivors of a genocide that the Kelvari had committed and then erased from history. Silence fell over the colony. Then a voice spoke from behind. Tay-1. It was Dr. Nara. The scientist stepped forward, holding a datapad in her hands. She had been watching Yuna and Gom for weeks. She had been studying the Ravix in secret, and now she had something to share. The doctor's voice was steady as she spoke. She explained that she had scanned the Ravix brains. She explained that they showed neural patterns that should not exist in mindless creatures. She explained that Yuna's kindness had awakened something in Gom, something ancient and intelligent. Then she shared something else. Something she had found in the old colonial archives that someone had tried to delete. Records of the original settlement. Reports of a native species that had built cities and created art. Orders to eliminate this species because they were in the way of mining operations. Documents that proved everything Yuna had said. The Ravix were not monsters. They never had been. Overseer Moran stepped forward. She was an old Kelvari with silver scales and tired eyes. She took the datapad from Dr. Nara and read it in silence. When she looked up, her face was pale. She ordered the soldiers to lower their weapons. Taiwan protested. He screamed that this was madness. He said they could not trust a human and a pack of beasts. He said the bombing should continue as planned. Moran looked at him with disgust. She said that she had served the Kelvari Empire for 60 years. She said she had done many things she was not proud of. But she would not be part of finishing a genocide that should never have started. She ordered Taiwan to be arrested. The soldiers hesitated, but they obeyed. 2 of them grabbed Taiwan and dragged him away. He kept screaming, but no one was listening anymore. Moran turned to Yuna. Her voice was heavy with shame. She asked what the Ravix wanted. She asked what could be done to make things right. Yuna looked back at Gom. The creature was watching her with all 6 eyes. She could feel its hope, its fear, its fragile trust. She turned back to the Overseer. She said that the Ravix wanted what any people would want. They wanted their land. They wanted their history. They wanted to be remembered as what they truly were, not as monsters in stories told to scare children. She said that nothing could undo the past, but the future could be different. The future could be better. Moran nodded slowly in the weeks that followed. Everything changed. The Kelvari Galactic Council launched an investigation into Varus 9. The old records were recovered. The genocide was exposed to the entire galaxy. There was outrage and shame and demands for justice. The Ravix were given back their territory. Scientists came to study their ancient cities with respect instead of destruction. Historians worked to piece together the culture that had almost been lost forever, and Una became something she had never expected to be. She became an ambassador, a bridge between species, a symbol of what was possible when someone chose kindness over fear. She traveled across the galaxy, telling the story of Gom and the Ravix. She spoke to governments and councils and ordinary people. She showed them that the things they called monsters were often just creatures who had been hurt so badly that they forgot how to trust. Gom never left her side. Years later, diplomats and leaders would come to meet the famous human who had tamed a monster. They would find something unexpected. A small woman drinking tea while a massive creature with 6 eyes purred beside her like an overgrown cat. The beast would lift its head when visitors arrived, checking if they were a threat to its human. Then it would settle back down and close its eyes, content to be near her. People often asked Una if she had ever been afraid. She would smile and scratch Gom behind where its ears would be. The creature would make a happy rumbling sound. She would say that humans had always been afraid. They were small and weak compared to most things in the universe. But somewhere along the way, they learned that fear did not have to mean hate. They learned that the things worth loving were often the things that scared them most on Earth. Her ancestors had tamed wolves and ridden horses and made friends with creatures that could have killed them. They built families with animals that others called dangerous. That was what made humans special, she would say. They did not just survive. They did not just conquer. They built families even with monsters. She would look at Gom, and Gom would look at her. 2 creatures from different worlds, different species, different histories, family. The galaxy had mocked her for taming a monster. Now, they understood the truth. She had not tamed him. She had loved him, and he had chosen her back. That was a kind of power that no weapon could match, and it had changed everything.